Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all honor, all praises, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwath that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai, back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to read through a precept in Jeremiah, the 7th chapter, in regards to the Queen of Heaven, right? So this essentially this idol that you see during this time was a big was an idol that our people worshipped. And one of the things was it strongly provoked the Lord to anger. And I wanted to read through this because it was very interesting how much of that which is then that was occurring back then is now, considering that we're in a time where a lot of our people are performing a very, I don't want to say a similar practice, but essentially a similar idea where they're provoking the Heavenly Father to anger, because what we have around the corner in the next couple of days is so-called Christmas. And one of the things that is very common, within our people is that, they go to essentially they might go to a local store, they get their trees, right? They set up their tree in the house, and then they put all these different gold ornaments. They put all these different ornaments on the trees. They put the fluff on the tree, to represent the snow. Then they put the star on top, so it shows you that this whole practice of Christmas is very it's a whole ritual that they're participating. They lay out the cookies, they put the wreath upon the doorway, and they put the socks. They hang the socks on the railway, on the stairs, so all these different things that a lot of our people don't seem to understand the origins thereof, and don't understand that that which is then is now, right? They don't understand their behaviors are provoking the Heavenly Father to anger, and they don't understand that this Christmas vibration, the whole ritual of all these things that you're doing, and you make your smoked ham, and you celebrate, and put out the pork and all that kind of stuff. A lot of our people don't understand that all these different behaviors that they're engaging in is provoking the Heavenly Father to anger. So I kind of wanted to go through and kind of do some parallels between what our people are doing right now and how much of our people's behaviors are very similar to the time during the time of the prophet Jeremiah, right? And and a lot of that, what is happening, or what has happened I should say, back then is very much and happening now, because as you have now, where you have essentially wisdom crying without, and she uttered her voice in the chief place of concourse, to roughly paraphrase, it's the same vibration. It's a very, very same vibration, right? So the only thing that's changed, the only thing that's really changed is the empire and the captivity, right? So I want to start off here. I'll start off in Ecclesiastes, and I'll go to the precept in regards to and what inspired this lesson. Ecclesiastes, give me 1 second. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9, and it says, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us," right? So the practices that you see that's occurring in Babylon the Great, also known as which is known as America, and it's Babylon the Great is known as the mother of all harlots. She encapsulates a lot of the different gods, practices which have existed before of ancient times, going back all the way to Egypt, right? Even before that, right? So the point is that all these different gods, they've all the practice has never changed. The only thing that is really changing is the name of that god. So it might have been one name in one captivity, then it changes, and it's something else in another captivity. A good example is Dionysus and Bacchus, right? That god of revelry and wine and essentially letting loose. And that is one of the things a lot of our people, when you read the story of Maccabees, and very interestingly enough, that is something very commonly practiced in the Caribbean, known as Bacchanalia. But that's not really the point of this lesson. The point of this lesson is that what has happened back then is happening now, right? So nothing has ever changed. People say that these practices are new and so on and so forth. There's really nothing new. You're just doing what was being done back in those times, right? Excuse me. So let me go to what actually inspired this lesson, the precept here. So this is Jeremiah 7 verse 18, going into the whole ritual. So this is one of the rituals that our people were doing back then, right? So this is I'll start at verse 17. Actually, I'll start at verse 16, and it says, "Pray not thou for this people, neither lift up a cry nor prayer for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear thee. Seest not what they do in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem." So this is giving you an idea of their behaviors during that time. Verse 18, and it says, "The children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger." So it's essentially, now you see it's a family affair. So you see the children are gathering the wood, the fathers are making sure the fire is warm, the women are kneading their dough, and now they're paying veneration to these different gods and pouring out these different offerings to the other gods. And we know, pursuant to the Psalms 96 chapter, that all these gods of the other nations are idols, right? But it shows you there was a whole ritual. So the children are doing this, the fathers are doing that, the mother is doing this, just like what was happening back then is happening now. Just like how you see, for example, when you see today, you might have the father, he might chop the tree down, or he might go to the store and buy a tree. And you have the woman, she might set up the wreath, right? As the wreath is essentially that circular object that people would hang on the door. I believe it's a representation of a womb, if I'm not mistaken. So the woman would put up all these different ornaments on the tree and deck it with gold and silver, and they give it a little they spice it up essentially in wickedness. And then the children, they might help to wrap the gifts, they might put on some ornaments themselves. So that much of what you're seeing back then, although the gods might be a bit different, the vibration is the same, and it's the same sentiment, because you're still provoking the Heavenly Father to anger, because those are not our customs. That's not part of our culture. It's not we're not supposed to have any other gods before the Heavenly Father, right? All these different gods are essentially, they're not real. Right? So here it says in verse 19, "Do they provoke me to anger, saith the Lord Yahweh, Bashim Shai? Do they not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces?" And our people don't understand that. They don't understand that the Lord is essentially a jealous power, and the Lord uses the other nations to punish us. So when you see certain accidents that happen during this time, when you see for example they put on decorations on the house, and there's accidents, somebody falls off the house, that's judgment, because our people don't understand that those things we're not supposed to do, right? Those are not part of your customs and your culture. So I want to jump across to the 10th chapter, since we're in that that time. But showing you, this is just really to kind of get an understanding of how much that was going on back then is going on now, right? So let me go across to this is Jeremiah 10 verse 1, and it says, "Hear ye the word of the Lord Yahweh speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them." Right? When they see certain things in the heavens, they equate it to either Mother Nature, they equate it to their sun god or their moon god, or Vishnu or Shiva and this person and that person, right? The Heavenly Father controls all things, right? So this is verse 3, and it says, "For the customs of the people are vain." So they're empty. Those customs that you're engaging in, this Christmas, it's essentially vain, because when you think about it, and as I was reflecting before I was doing the as I began to record, one of the things is that our customs, our true biblical culture and customs, not only does it bring forth life, it also brings us in remembrance in regards to the things that happened to us within our culture, within our history. So it was always about bringing some sort of remembrance in regards to certain periods of our own history. So you have Passover. Passover was a representation of what the Lord did for us and rescued us from the hands of the Egyptians and the great miracles that he performed. His name was very well magnified, right? And essentially the fear fell upon the other nations because they knew the power that stood for us, stood and defended us, right? You have Hanukkah when you go into the history of the Maccabees and how bravely they fought for our laws and our customs, right? So that was also a portion of our high holy days. Christmas is not one of our high holy days because it doesn't bring you in remembrance into regards to who you are as a people. It's vain, like it says right here. I'll read it again. "For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, and the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with gold. They deck it with silver and the gold, and they fasten it with nails and the hammers, and it move not. They are upright as a palm tree, but they speak not." It says, "They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good." Right? So they're the lifeless idols, and that's one of the things when you go through the scriptures in regards to the behaviors of the different other nations. They always paid homage to all these gods that were lifeless. There was no life in any of them. That's why the prophet Elijah, he was mocking the different prophets of Baal, because he's like, where's your God at? Is your God asleep? Is he taking a nap? And that's the spirit we're in. We're in the spirit of Elijah in terms of we're mocking all these different idols because there's no life in these different idols that our people worship, and our people don't seem to understand that, right? They're wise to do evil, as the scriptures say, but to do good they have no knowledge, right? So I wanted to also touch on something in regards to our history. I wanted to read, actually, where is it? Okay, I typed in Queen of Heaven Goddess, right? So here is the AI overview here. So it says the Queen of Heaven title is referred to various powerful sky goddesses in the ancient Near Eastern, and Mediterranean cultures, most notably Inanna, Ishtar of the Mesopotamian love war goddess. It says Astarte, Ashtoreth, Canaanite, Phoenician, Anat, and Isis, Egyptian, and later associated with Hera, Juno, Greek/Roman. So you see, different I don't want to say empires, but different, not just time periods, but different geographical spaces. You had the same God, but the vibration was the same, but the name just changed, like I was saying earlier, right? And it says potentially Asherah in the Hebrew Bible, and this is something that was mentioned also with King Solomon. So it says ancient key figures. It says major goddess of love, fertility, war, often called the queen of heaven and earth. This is Ishtar, right? Linked to the planet Venus. It says Astarte and Ashtar is the Phoenician / Canaanite equivalent, a fertility and war goddess worshipped with rites in an ancient Near East, right? So here it says Hera / Juno in Greek and Roman mythology, the consort of Zeus / Jupiter, the queen of the gods and the goddess of marriage and women, right? So there's a lot of you have a lot of what you call like woman worship, in this vibration of these different gods. And the Apostle Paul outlined the order, right? The head of the woman is the man, and the head of the Hamashiach is the Most High, and the head of the man is Hamashiach Yahushai, right? So, I wanted to read this actually because it mentioned Ashtoreth, right? And you start to see some of the consequences of why we're also in this situation that we're in. Let me go to, just bear with me on this. This is 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, and it says, "But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh and the women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites of the other nations, concerning which the Lord Yahweh said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go in to them, neither shall they come unto you, for they will turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon cleave unto these in love." And it says, "And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after the other gods, and his heart was not perfect to the word of the Lord, with the Lord, his power, as was David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord as David his father." Right? So his mind was more chaste. David transgressed, but this was not one of his transgressions. King Solomon's transgressions, okay, now he starts building these different starts paying more reverence towards these other gods, right? And that is the same when you look at the way our people are now. When you look at them, like especially like in the church, it's mostly our women, and they turn the man's his heart away from the Heavenly Father, right? Especially like women of the other nations, right? And then what happens? You have a generation that grow up not knowing their culture, not knowing their history, right? So they start, it's basically like the sons of God going and laying with the daughters of men, and instead of her coming under you and your culture and essentially submitting to you, the Israelite man, his mind is going towards these other nations, and that is what provokes our nation. That's what provokes the Heavenly Father to anger, because our people don't understand. There's a strong sentiment of why you see culture is so important, right? You start to see why there's a strong need for order, right? Because when you go back into the precept, the fathers essentially were also taking part in the ritual by kindling the fire towards trying to give reverence to this Queen of Heaven. When a father in his right mind, he is supposed to actually be able to instruct his wife and essentially not make Adam's mistake. But you see him still making Adam's mistake, and you see him essentially not in a chaste mindset. When I say chaste, I mean the word pure. He's not going after the ways of the heathen, right? So now you see here, in terms of Solomon's rulership, his mind is no longer perfect towards the Heavenly Father, right? So he's more sophisticated, it's more corrupt, it's more polluted, right? So you start to see here how the Israelites' man's mind is supposed to be more chaste. As a matter of fact, that's what the Apostle Paul mentions. Because we read these things in terms of understanding the things that are written aforetime are actually written for our learning. This is 2 Corinthians 11, verse 2. And it says, "For I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to a Mashiach Yahushai, but I fear, lest by any means, as the serpent begot Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in the Mashiach Yahushai." So our minds, we're supposed to have a pure mind towards Yahweh Yahushai, especially as the man. But you see here, when you go back into that account with Jeremiah, the man's mind was already corrupted. It was already filled with those works, right? It was polluted because he didn't learn from Adam's mistake, right? Let me go here. Let me go to the Apocrypha here. This is Sirach chapter 19, verse 2, and it says, "Wine and women will make men of understanding to fall away, and he that cleaveth to harlots will become impudent." So, it shows you that, just in reference to King Solomon, you start to see his downfall, because he's starting to pay homage. During his administration, he starts to pay homage to those other gods, and through those different wives, because they're supposed to be coming under his vibration, not the other way around, right? So he essentially now, after his transgression, now he provoked the Heavenly Father to anger, and his kingdom was torn, right? So that's pretty much it. I didn't want to go too long, but it shows you the importance of culture. As a matter of fact, I'll end off with this last one in Sirach 33, since I made that last Sirach 33, verse 9, and it says, "Some of them he hath made high days and hallowed them, and some of them he had made ordinary days." And I'm reading this because, Christmas is not one of our high holy days. We have our own high holy days which bring us in remembrance into who we are as a people, and Christmas is not one of them. Worshiping Queen of Heaven and baking cakes and gathering the wood and smoothing out the dough, those are not part of our customs. So we have our own culture and our own customs, which keeps us holy and separate and above these other nations. So, and as Israelite men, we're supposed to be essentially chaste. As a people, we're supposed to be chaste. not having our minds corrupted by these different odious works that dim our vibration, and essentially it causes us to die, because the scriptures say that the wages of sin is death, because all these vibrations, all these rituals, are people engage in these things and they don't see how it's destroying them and their welfare. Not only is it provoking the Heavenly Father to anger, but it's causing them to sin and transgress, right? So I'll leave the lesson there. But Lord's will, as always, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.